Okay. So our next speaker is Mr. Raphael Zuber from KUR. He graduated from Timiş in 2001, and in 2003 he started his own office, where he did a lot of very interesting projects that I will let him tell you about. What I would like to add is that he contributed to some magazines you might have been reading, like Facade, Architects, or the Architectural Review. And he has been teaching in quite a lot of interesting schools lately, like at Timiş, Mendrisio, Cornell, or the Oslo School of Architecture. I would like to invite him here to tell us a bit about his projects.
Hello, I'm Raphael Zuber, and I will start immediately now. Plants are something that we generally sense as something beautiful. Each plant looks different. Also, different examples of the same species have their own specific characteristics. And if we are precise, we still find all of them beautiful. The form of a plant is very logic. It is the precise result of the genetic constitution and an endless number of external influences that have an impact on each single plant. The condition of the soil and its transformation, changes of temperature, each drop of rain, each slightest breeze of wind, and so on, all these in the end gives to a plant its specific momentary form. If we would know all these data, we could reconstruct or even perhaps predict the appearance of each plant. But at the moment, we are still far away of being capable to collect and store all this information, much less than being capable to process them. But I think that the knowledge that at least theoretically we could understand, we can actually understand the form of a plant, that the form is a result of a logical process that we can exactly explain, makes every single plant beautiful. This painting is something of the most beautiful I have ever seen. It is the portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, or the Lady with an Ermine, painted by Leonardo da Vinci between 1490 and 94. Leonardo was an extremely precise observer. To be able to depict things, he didn't only want to know its appearance, but he also wanted to understand its inner structure and logic. In addition to countless studies from the nude and sketches, he also speculated about the inside of the human being, and later on opened bodies to describe and sketch the structure of the muscles, the organs, and their correlation. In this treaty of painting, he describes all the trees he knows in the Central European region. He describes all the trees he knows, the seeds, the formation of the roots, and the system of water distribution up to the leaf top. He describes following which criteria the bark develops and how it ages, and, dependent on the cardinal direction, where it changes color and how. He describes following which criteria and which system the branches split and the leaves develop, and all these for each single sort of trees. Leonardo wanted to depict what he saw as close to reality as possible. Further, and with continuous development of his oeuvre more and more, he generalized, idealized, and speculated. The face of Cecilia Gallerani that you see here, for example, is almost a geometrical oval. The ermine is in effect too big, and the hand is not her own hand, but the hand that can already be found in earlier sketches. So I think that Leonardo, with his scientific precision, that means with a certain objectiveness, paired with speculation and idealization, we could also say authorship, has created works that are much more beautiful as something that we could ever have imagined in reality. this is my office. I don't make, for me working and not working is kind of the same. I don't go to the office in the morning and have hobbies in the afternoon or something like this. It's all a unity. So it's clear that it's also important that my office is a place where I feel well, a nice space, where I feel comfortable, where I do kind of everything with my collaborators. Right now we are in free. We work on the big table that you see on the right hand. On the left table we have meetings with clients, with engineers, whatever. It's kind of a meeting space. We also eat lunch there, we cook there. And it's a place where I always like to go back. Then every Saturday morning I go to the market and buy one flower that you see on the big table. And this flower somehow changes the atmosphere in the office. Depending on what kind of flower it is, color or the shape, the form of it, there is a slightly different atmosphere there. And this is something, the decision which flower to choose or to buy is a very intuitive act. I mean, I cannot say why today I like this flower more than the other flower or next time something else. It's just something that happens very quickly, intuitively, and that creates the atmosphere for the next week in our office. I will show you 4 projects now. 2 of them are built, the others are still projects. The first one is a schoolhouse and kindergarten. It was finished in 2011, 3 years ago. It was a public competition in the southern part of Switzerland. It's a building that stands in the middle of a small village called Grono. It stands in the middle of a public square, in the middle of a garden also, and is a perfect square. It's a structure that doesn't have any particular direction. Everything is kind of same important, which sits in a circular garden. This is a situation plan. There are 3 streets surrounding the plot. The round, the circular line that you see is a wall, 70 centimeter high wall, creating a garden inside of the wall and a public space outside of the garden, which is the space where the kids can be during the breaks. There are 2 entrances, one on the northwest side, which leads directly into the school. The other entrance on the southeast side leads into the kindergarten. And this is possible because the whole plot is slightly sloping. But on the left, it's 3 meters higher than on the right side. That means the entrance that you see on the left hand is a bridge going over the crater of the garden, upwards slightly, and the other one on the right is a ramp leading down into the crater and the kindergarten. Here in section you see it better. On the left you enter ground floor, kindergarten. On the right, first floor, the school, where the public rooms are also, like a big meeting room for the village, like toilets, like teacher space, library, and so on. And the classrooms are on the top. Then there's a small basement with technical spaces. Which is this? This is ground floor with kindergarten. There's a covered outside space when you enter. Then you come into a corridor, and on both sides there are 2 classrooms with a mensa in the back where the kids eat lunch. This is first floor, with the big community space on the right. The entrance on top, with a covered outside space again, leading to corridor and then through the other spaces. top floor with 4 classrooms in the corners and 2 handcraft rooms in between. The whole building is out of concrete, the structure is out of concrete, and the thermal division is made by big pieces of glass. So this here is the structure, is one pillar, this is a pillar, this is a pillar, and this is a pillar, and this here is glass going all around. Here you see the structural system more clearly. These red parts are structure, 4 columns in the middle of each facade. Then there's the elevator core, load bearing also, and this circular piece of wall. This is how it looks from outside. Public square around. The garden inside, which is outside space for the kindergarten. The 4 columns on the other sides as well. And the geometry of the facade is kind of the result of this structure. We could also say that this here is an arch that is tilted by 90 degrees. And the stone that would be here, or the last stone that makes this arch structurally working, is taken away and replaced by cables that lead from this point to this point, for example, to hold up this corner. This pillar here is very small, it's about 2 meters here, down here. This one, because there is the opening here in the ground floor, is wider and makes that the whole structure is stable in this direction for horizontal forces. Into this direction, the building would still fall, and that's why there is this piece of wall here to stabilize the building in this direction. So every piece of concrete that is building is part of the structure and is necessarily needed. Except of this wall here, which hides the toilets which are behind it. The openings have the geometry of a quarter of an ellipse. The structurally most efficient form would be a parabola, but this was just kind of too complicated to build on construction sites, so we changed to the ellipse, which is very close to parabola and is much easier to construct in reality. These ellipses are all exactly the same. This is the same like this one, so we could reuse the framework, which made the work much more efficient. But because the floors have different floor heights, and there is also this opening in the top, which kind of ends the building, these ellipses are moved in the facade. The engineer told us the minimum down here that we need, and the minimum at the highest point here of the ellipse, and in between these 2 parameters we could kind of make a composition, we could move around. That means that the structure at the end is the result of a pure engineer or of engineering thinking with architectural composition, also it's a mix. The highest, or the ellipse in the highest floor here starts exactly, the highest point of the ellipse is exactly in the corner. This one is moved a little bit towards inside, and this one even more, which makes that this point is already coming down again. The concrete is slightly colored with yellow and black pigments to create this brown color that kind of corresponds to the soil at this plot. Then there are also these parts that you can open, here. This is made out of wood. It's like a door that you can open for natural ventilation. That's a view from another side. You see only 2 floors. The other is kind of sunken down in this crater. the main entrance to the middle floor. And down here is the kindergarten with its outside space. This is the covered outside space where the kids can also play when it's raining. Then you enter this corridor. You see this is a structural element out of concrete, the elevator core, and this wall is also structural, this fragment of a circle. Everything else you could take out. This wall here, for example, is out of brick and then just painted with the mortar that is in between the bricks and with color. The doors are MDF and pine tree wood, which is also slightly painted with oil and brown pigments. The staircase in the center of the building, all out of concrete. This is one of these handcraft rooms. You see this distance between the structure outside and the thermal insulation, the glass, makes kind of that the space seems to be bigger than it actually is, because you don't see the window frame everywhere. You see it down here, but not on top here. This is the acoustical insulation here that covers the frame. Here the frame is attached at the wall from outside, so it's kind of hard to read where the space ends and where is inside and outside. And this is this door you can open for ventilation. This is a classroom, view over the corner. This is a kindergarten class, which with direct access to outside, with big sliding doors. And this is the mesa space. And here I think you see very well this kind of melting together of inside and outside. The second project is a competition that we did for a funeral chapel. It was a very simple program, just one space where you could make different kind of ceremonies, use it in different ways. Didn't have necessarily be heated. And we also did one space which is 7 meters wide and 29 long, with 2 big columns and a hanging wall, a wall that is hanging from the ceiling down until 2 meters and 20 height to kind of separate this one space. And then there are 2 columns outside also. Here and here. And these 4 columns these 4 columns kind of create a system that again connects inside and outside, that create points of higher density or less density. You don't really know where the center is of this system. It creates also kind of an eternal system going all over, endlessly. This is the situation. There was an existing wall here, making like this, separating the parking spot and the cemetery here. These buildings were existing, and a big entrance hall here as a covered outside space. The access was planned originally here through this alley. You would walk like this, turn over, and then enter like this into the cemetery. We proposed to put the building exactly on the way, on the access to the cemetery, to make it part of entering the cemetery. So you walk like this here, you enter the funeral chapel here at this corner, you walk through, and at the end, after the ceremony, you go out here directly to the cemetery. Then, because of its height, this facade is also kind of a symbolic entrance or a symbol for the cemetery. This is the floor plan. The hanging wall here, exactly in the middle. This big column here with a piece of wall, kind of creating an entrance space here. Here a bigger column with a square basis where to put the body. And the door out into the cemetery. These are spaces for storage of chairs and stuff. This is the main facade. This triangle here is out of concrete to stabilize the building into this direction for horizontal forces. Everything else is made out of bricks, the same bricks that were already existing in the other buildings. The long section, you see the hanging wall now dividing the space in two areas. Two big lamps here, and these columns that don't touch the ceiling. They are not structurally needed because the space is only 7 meters wide. That means that they have to have another function. What kind of function ever. The bigger one is even cantilevering here on this base. In the floor plan you can see that the center of this one is exactly on the corner of the base. And then the big door here out into the cemetery. In the other section, you also see that the upper part here of the hanging wall is made out of concrete again to stabilize the building into this direction. These two walls out of brick, they would, by wind forces, they would fall down, and by connecting them with this piece of concrete here, the building gets rigid. And then this part here is hanging down out of concrete, out of brick, with a concrete beam down here, held up with cables that go in between the bricks, creating this separation. The same with the bigger column here. The parts that take the loads down here are out of concrete, and then it continues with bricks. A very pragmatic construction. This is this piece of wall here to define the entrance space. And that's how it could look like from the entrance. You see that the parts of the hanging wall here out of brick, they don't touch the other wall because they don't have a structural function, it's just spatially. The floor is also out of concrete and everything is painted in this slight blue color. This is a house I have seen this spring in Japan, in Kyoto. And it's a house that has some aspects that I like very much, and one of them I would like to explain you. From outside, you kind of, you don't see a house, you just see this fence out of wood going around and some plants behind. It's like something hidden that you want to discover back there. You see that there are big, kind of sophisticatedly treated trees in behind. You enter, and then you see this very beautiful tree here. You just see the shape or the form of the tree that is cut in the form of the surrounding mountains. If you could see the mountains here in the back, they have kind of the same geometry as this tree. So this is how you enter, and you see a door also here, but you cannot enter here, you have to walk around on this side. You walk through different spaces, you enter the house, but you don't really realize that you enter a house. You also enter through a courtyard, and it just happens that you enter there, and at the end you arrive in this space, which is the main space. And here, this view out here is the same tree that you saw before, but from here you don't see its shape, but its structure. You see the branches that are also manipulated. They are not growing in a way they would grow naturally. They are supported by these beams here or pillars, but also with beams horizontally to carefully kind of create this structure that also links to the building. This here is a column of the building that optically you read together with the structure of the tree. So it's a very complex relation to the context or to its surroundings. It's not just adapting how things look, how the neighboring house looks, for example, or whatever. It's kind of a mental connection to the context and its surroundings. This is a project, again, a competition that we did for a university campus in Switzerland, in Mendrisio, for an architectural school. It was a very big program, very complex. The site was close to a train station, with the railway tracks passing by here, with a lot of noise, with a lot of smoke, electrosmoke, which would make it impossible to use very precise measuring tools inside of the buildings if there would be windows. So it was requested to make a building without any windows to the railway tracks. The plot was quite big, it extends also down here. And what we did is a very efficient and simple to build structure, a pillar slab structure, prefabricated pillars and concrete slabs surrounded by a concrete wall that would kind of enclose the spaces. There's a corridor in the middle of 5 meter wideness, and the whole building is 130 meters long around. This is very efficient to build, it's very good to use because it's flexible, you can do all kinds of different spaces in there, but it has one big problem. And the main problem, I would say, is that it doesn't have a center, this building. I mean, it's kind of a fragment of something. You could make it longer, you could cut it wherever you want. It doesn't change the character, and there is no point or no part of the building where people would meet, or where you would kind of feel this is the center, there should be the cafe there, or the entrance, or whatever. It's just a piece of sausage. And that's why we decided to, with this surrounding concrete wall, without any windows, we do two things. First, we solve this problem of not having daylight on this side here, so we moved it away to create a courtyard of 6 meter wideness, bringing light down. And this 6 meter is a wideness that kind of corresponds to the city of Mendrisio, this old structure. It's also, the streets are also about 6 meter wide. The other thing that we did is that we created this courtyard here, again, by moving away the external wall. So this is kind of an in-between space between the inside of the building and the facade. It's a courtyard with the cafe, with the mensa, but it's also the main entrance. You enter from up here, come into this courtyard, and from here then you go into the heated spaces. But you can also come from here through the park, enter here to the courtyard, and then enter the building. This piece here is the main staircase. So the building at the end with these two moves is still kind of a fragment of something that could be much bigger. The park or the garden is still part of this building out here, and it has kind of a center here, which makes that you also feel that the building is much bigger as the actually built part. This is the situation drawing of the station here. The students would arrive here and then underground cross the tracks, enter here into this courtyard, and then going into this building. Another good thing of this courtyard is that it's kind of an entrance hall, an atrium that doesn't have to be heated. So also from this point of view, it's very efficient. Then the garden here, we thought it could be nice to just have like one big street with trees around where you can walk around and then enter through the center. section. Here the garden, here the railway tracks, and this is this wall that is moved away from the building with 6 meters and held back with this triangular part of the wall, with light coming in here into these spaces, but also down here like this. There's a huge parking, 2 stories of parking with 400 parking. Then lots of storage and mechanical spaces for experiments and laboratories, with an entrance for big cars also to drive around. This is ground floor. You enter from here under the railway tracks, over a small bridge here into this courtyard. This is all outside space here, and then here you enter the building and go up with elevators. This is the standard floor, the structure, which you could arrange or divide however you want. For example, like this, with smaller office spaces here and bigger auditoriums here in this part. This is the facade to the railway station. It's completely closed except of this triangle, which is exactly on this axis here on this side, emphasizing the center again. This is the corridor with this part of the cross-shaped courtyard coming in. And I think if you are a little bit sensitive, you can feel that this here, what you see here, is a special point in this corridor. It's not just an endless street with no direction. There is something special here, and once you know it's a cross or it's kind of a central space, you can feel that the building is much bigger than what it actually is. This is this courtyard with the Mensa on the right, the garden on the left, which you can also feel as part of the building, and the staircase tower here. Everything out of concrete, again, a little brownish. Then these parts here, for example, it looks like random, but of course it's very precisely thought. It's part of the structure. This wall here, which is 10 meters high, without this piece here, but also without this ring around it, would not hold structurally. So all the pieces that you see are also kind of structurally relevant. Another view. And this is now a frontal view to the main entrance. From here you would enter left and right into the building. This is a very new project. It's the first time I present it here also. It's a project for a weekend house on the Isle of Harris in Scotland. For the ones of you that don't know Scotland, it's kind of a rough climate, but it's also kind of friendly. In a warm summer day, for example, on this island is about 25 degrees. A cold winter day is about 5 degrees. So it's never really hot, it's never really cold, but there's a lot of rain, of course, and there's a lot of wind. And there is almost no vegetation on this island, at least no high vegetation. There's a lot of grass and sheep and rocks, not much more. What we thought to do here, or what we did, is that we divided the house in two very different parts. One part, which is the private part, this here, as one big space. one big space that is very much oriented to inside, that is almost kind of an archetypical inside space, where you hang around, where you read books, but where you also cook or eat. And the bedrooms then on this side here, with the view towards the sea down here. And these spaces have the character almost of being outside. They are very open, they have a structure that is very fragmented, and it's kind of the opposite of the living space. This is the situation. You arrive with this street, then you drive down, 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 you can park here, enter from the back in the living room, where you still don't see the sea, and then the bedrooms in front of here with the open view downwards the sea. The entrance is here on top. You enter through this corridor, you can leave your clothes here, and then you enter the main space. The main space is a very narrow space. It's 3 meters wide and I think 23 meters long and 4 meters high. That means it has the character almost of a corridor with two main directions. One here, of course, where it's closed, and one out here, where you see along the shoreline. It's a space with 3 windows, one this here, then one here, where you see at the rock upwards. This window is starts from 0 at the floor and goes up to 140. So when you're sitting, you see out, and when you stand, you don't see anymore. You just see down the rock. Then the third window is this here. There's a glass on top. It's kind of a top light. So you look in the direction of the sea. You know down here is the sea. You watch out, but you don't see it because this here is a wall which goes up 45 degrees. So you look kind of at this concrete wall in direction of the sea. And this, I think, will create a kind of a more complicated relation to the sea than if you would just have a huge panorama window and watch out or watch down on the sea. Then there's a fireplace here, which is sunken in the ground a little bit, the kitchen, dining, and here you can sit down when you're cooking or whatever. And then there are 2 doors in this space, one here, you enter this corridor to the 3 bedrooms with a small bath to the master bedroom, and here you come out to outside directly to a covered terrace. Then there is here at this point, this is a column, not touching the floor, it's hanging down from the ceiling, and it's on the same axis as this piece of wall outside. So that means it's a house with, on one hand, 2 very different atmospheres, this inside space here, then the bedrooms, which are almost like being outside, but then there's also a symmetry axis here, dividing this building in these 2 parts, but there is also a point symmetry at this point here. And I think that when you walk up and down in this floor and in this space, it will gradually change. At some point you will feel it very strongly will feel this symmetry axis with 2 parts, and then suddenly when you come in this area here, you will much more feel this point symmetry and the space kind of turning around this point. And even when you are outside here in free nature, through this piece of wall here, you will kind of be reminded or connected to this point symmetry. The bedrooms are very low, they are only 2 meters and 10 in height, and the ground is slightly higher. When you step from this space into the corridor, there's a step from 40 centimeters, so you go up. You see it here in section. This is the main space with this opening here, with this kind of endless view along the shore. And then you go to the bedrooms here, is 40 centimeters up, and you have this open view to the ocean, to the sea. This is a section through this window with this 45 degree angled wall here and a glass on top. And this height here is 2.20 meters, so you can really stand into this opening. The long section, with this window here again, these two doors, this leading into the corridor to the bedrooms, this leading directly outside, and this is something that you can open to have fresh air, but if you also want to connect more closely to outside from the sitting area, you can open it. The other section, you also see that the end of this space goes up slightly, so it's not just cut, it's also kind of a fragment of the space. It could also continue. The hanging column here, and this is the entrance door with this window with the view to the rocks. One view from outside. You see this is the main space, which is higher. Here the bedrooms, and then the roof kind of connects these two elements, makes one piece out of them, and creates kind of a front facade here. Now this is the main space from the sitting area with this big window to the right. The hanging column in the far back left. The kitchen area here. The fireplace. And here you can kind of feel this symmetry axis here, or this wall dividing very strongly inside and outside, or these two parts of the house. From the other side, here you feel much more the hanging column, or this point symmetry. The space kind of starts to turn around this. The doors with this 40 centimeter step. The sitting area, the space continuing up here. And this is the master bedroom. And here you see it's a very open space. It's just pieces of walls, and this wall here goes down and comes into the space. This is all concrete. This is the part under the window with the bathroom there for the master bedroom. It's also the only part of the house where you see in this direction. This is a freestanding column, so everything is kind of fragmented and teared apart here. So it's really an outside space. And here, the ceiling coming down slightly to focus the view to the sea. This is the last project I'm going to show just very quickly. It's a project that we just finished. The people moved in 3 weeks ago. It's an apartment building with 5 floors, 5 apartments. On each floor there's one apartment, and these apartments have kind of the character of a single family house. It's a low-cost project. We had a very restricted budget. The main entrance is here. With an elevator, you go up and down and enter directly your apartment here. The heated part of the building goes around like this. This is the main space, kind of the public living area. The bedrooms, the kitchen, bathrooms are in the back there. And then we attached 2 outside elements. One is here. Staircase, which is outside, so we don't have to heat it, we don't have to insulate it, it's very cheap to build. And then we made a big balcony here in this corner, going around until here in front of this big window. This window is 4.5 meters wide. It's not separated, it's just one piece of glass, which you cannot open, it's fixed. So that makes it also necessary that the balcony goes around here to clean it from outside. But what was the main idea, of course, was that even though it's a very cheap construction to make it as generous as possible, as big as possible in feeling, And that's why we decided to put the balcony in the corner with these concrete walls here supporting the balcony, and which makes that now when you are in this space, through the staircase, through this balcony, you feel very strongly this here as kind of the center of the house. Even though it's physically the corner of the building, you feel it as a center, and you feel the main space kind of rotating around and extending endlessly. We don't have any pictures yet of this building. We are doing them, just one that we made ourselves, which is this. It's taken from here, looking out like this. This is the main space on the right, the balcony on the left hand, the balcony on the right side. It's the ground floor, which is also sunken down into the earth by 55 centimeters. Also, this is a result of economy, because the height was defined by the building law. So, because we had to fit in 5 apartments, we had to go down a little bit. But it's also something that I like. It makes the space very grounded, kind of cozy in the earth. And you see also how the windows are attached. The big window here. This one is attached inside, and this one is attached outside. You see the frame here, but not here, similarly to the school. On top you also don't see it, because the slab of the balcony is much thinner than the slab of the inside slabs. They have floor heating on top also. And this makes that you don't see the frame here, and all these kind of putting together things in a very direct way make that inside and outside is very strongly connected again. Even with the sun protection inside here, this wall, which is an inside wall, gets kind of the character of an outside wall. Thank you.